Good evening again. We are here again. We are here again. We say thank you to all of you. Wow, thank you. Glad to see you again. Please share this. Invite your loved ones. Let them know we are live. We are back again. Nice to see you all again. Those of you on YouTube, please don't forget to share. Share with your loved ones. Share with your loved ones. Let them know our boss has landed in Scotland. We are here for Scotland today. Our guest is already on the waiting, waiting for us with the good, those engaging conversation tonight. And you're going to hear how she has used her lived experience about children's services to become a parent advocate, panelist, and writer for social work publication in London. This is not an easy journey. And even coming on this platform to share a lived experience is not easy. So please let's know that it takes a courage. Moving away from the trauma, the experience is not an easy journey. So we welcome you again. Those of you, if you have not subscribed, please make sure you subscribe. Make sure you subscribe now. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share with your loved ones. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share with your loved ones. Please invite your loved ones. Once we reach a certain number, we are going to start. We don't want to delay too much today. We don't want to delay too much. So please invite your loved ones. We are on YouTube now. We want to check. We are on YouTube now. We are waiting for your comments. We are waiting for your comments. Invite your loved one. Please subscribe. Apart from subscribing, there are other methods, other ways you can support Save the Woman now. When you subscribe, always comment, always like, always share. The second way is to join our membership on Save the Woman channel. If you join that membership, there are loads of video that are only meant for members. It's already there. We've got like more than 4 or 5 videos now that will tell you more about this, equip you. But you need to join a particular grade. Those of you on grade A, you have some shout out. We appreciate you. We say thank you. Those of you on grade B, you have some specific video. And those of you on grade C, you definitely have more videos. And also, you can also benefit from our courses. We can also give you a special code at any point in time to be on a special code. And after that, there's a space you can also say super text. There's something they call super text on YouTube now. Buy super text. When you click text, there's a space there, a button there. If you see it, please comment on YouTube. First person that buy super text, we are going to specially recognize you. You can buy with any amount from £5, £10, £20, 50, 100, £500. All this will go straight to support Save the Woman directly, to support the Save the Woman work directly. We don't want to waste much of your time today. So on YouTube, we are following you now. We say thank you to all our subscribers. We say thank you to all our members that have joined our membership team. We are not funded. We are struggling with funds because there's a system that is paying those prices. And if they are making such huge profits, they will not want this kind of organization to sustain. We can only sustain through your help. We can only sustain through your help. And also, some people have brought to our attention, they think maybe they bring a case to us, we always put them on YouTube. No, that is not how it works. It is the testimony that we share on YouTube, and this is mainly on consent. And family love to come and tell their story, not just for you to hear, but for you to learn and to create awareness. So please feel free. If you don't want us to put it out there, that is your decision. But we encourage to enlighten families, to educate more families so that they know their rights. So, without wasting much of our time, I'll bring on our guest for tonight. Please take a pen, and get some knowledge tonight. Thank you. Over to you.
Hi. I think before I go into explaining the case and what happened, I really want to just focus on actually hope and testimony and just to set the scene before I start going into, all of the horrific stuff that we went through. I just want to give people that sense of hope um and how we got out, because God says, I'm more than an overcomer through Christ, and I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And also, Revelation 12:11, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And I really very much believe in that. I'm very much believe in speaking not just the truth from the sense of, the bad things that happened, but how I got out. Um, and also to say that God looks at all of the children as his possessions, as his, and there's no harm that can come to them without judgment. And very much when I was going through this trial, I was led to Ezekiel 21:27-29. And it says, I will overturn, overturn it, and it shall be no more until he whose right it is to come, and I will give it to him. I feel like the trial that we went through has finished. The trial has ended. A hearing has happened. God has heard the pleas of everyone who's been going through this collectively through social services that are not acting in a lawful way. And there is a judgment. And I know that judgment, is not happening in a way that people want it to happen. It's not happening fast enough. There's not justice that's being done in an earthly way, but just trust and be assured that there is judgment coming. It does come, and there is hope. So I guess I can start by outlining what happened and starting from the beginning. In 2021, I was dealing with a lot of housing instability. And I was actually also working for NGOs and the police as well in a consultancy service because I have lived experience 13 years ago of modern slavery. I'm a modern slavery survivor. And so as a result of that, I had to be very careful of my data that was stored. It was all restricted access to my data as part of the job that I was doing. And yeah, I basically had housing issues off the back of my history. It was very hard for me to have the, I guess, like independence of housing. Economically, I was struggling, like a lot of people were, I guess, and are. Um, so I approached Perth and Kinross Council and I made a housing application and I disclosed my history to the housing officer in a sense of being sensitive with my data because of the job that I was doing in anti-trafficking and consultancy services and offering recovery courses to survivors. So I explained this as a broader spectrum, in relation to data, and also about the housing instability and the issues with that, and that we needed to be housed. Um, the application was put through. There wasn't really any sign that there was anything untoward with that application. It went through, and we were placed into temporary housing within Perth and Kinross. Within a very short space of time, there was a police welfare check. So the police turned up at the door and they took me by complete surprise and shock. I didn't know why they were there. They were very elusive as to why they were there. They didn't give me much indication. I asked them, why they were there, and they just kept on saying, is everything okay? Are you okay? And just basically fishing for information, really. until eventually, after probably about 30 minutes, I said, I need to know why you're here. I don't understand why you've turned up. It makes no sense. And they said, well, we've heard that you're part of a trafficking ring. um, and I said, I'm a survivor of trafficking. Yes. And I was actually under what's known as the National Referral Mechanism at the time, which is a UK wide, it's a recognition of status. So if you've been through trafficking, you go through the National Referral Mechanism as a part of process to validate what you have experienced, I guess. So I was under that at the time. So to be for the police to come in so uninformed and ask such a uninformed question, to me, again, it just was very confusing and a shocking situation to be in. I just didn't understand where I was coming from. Um, Actually, they just wanted to know about my past and my history, and I said I'm not prepared to talk about that in this context. Like, if you want to know any information about me, it's all on file. Like, there's anything that you need to know would be on file with in relation to my history. I'm not prepared to, be interviewed about it, because that was essentially what they were looking to do. Um, so after this incident happened, I did notice for at least 3 months, I would say, quite a lot of what I now realize was police surveillance. Um, so to give you an example, it was commonplace for a police car or police van to be parked stationary outside the block of flats that I was in. And this is Perth and Kinross is a very rural area. It's not a city where there's a heavy police presence, and there was no reason for them to be daily continuously parked outside this block of flats. Um, and then also, whenever I used to go into town, for example, it was quite overt where it at least watched to some degree. I don't know whether that was because my son's mixed race heritage. He's Jamaican and Irish, and we stood out. So maybe that was why. But this was a pattern that persisted and persisted. And there was one situation where I decided to test whether or not this was actually, occurring, or whether it was just me being hyper vigilant. So I took a bus to somewhere even more rural. It was very, very, very far out. And when I took this bus, there was actually a police vehicle that was tailgating that bus for the whole journey, which was a lengthy journey. It was probably about 40 minutes that it was tailgating the bus. I got off in the middle of nowhere, and this vehicle stopped, overtly looked and to see what I was doing, and then turned back around again. So, by that point, I had concluded that something was not right with what was occurring, coupled with the welfare check and this strange, seemingly surveillance that was happening. And I couldn't put my finger on why it was happening. I didn't understand at that point. So fast forward now, probably about roughly 2 months into this happening, I was then contacted by Children's Services, Perth and Kinross Children's Services, who advised me that they had a case. And so they came to the property unannounced, I believe, and they wanted to ask me lots and lots of questions about what had happened in my past, but they had made it into the present. So rather than saying, we know you've got a history where you were trafficked, we want to know more about that, they were saying, are you being trafficked? This was the line of questioning. I thought it was ridiculous at the time. I honestly laughed, because I just did not understand where this had come from. And I didn't take it too seriously. I was frustrated and annoyed that this was happening, but I didn't feel threatened by it, because I thought that, I have so much evidence by the work that I'm doing to show that that is not happening right now. That's not the case. That once they had done their assessment, this would have been closed. So, I engaged with them. I submitted evidence to them, which proved the job that I did, the consultancy that work that I was doing, the work with the police and NGOs, my knowledge of trafficking, the level of healing that I'd come to many years later, because I'd accessed therapy for many years and done a lot of work on myself, which showed what my parenting capacity was as well, because I'd been through therapy and all of this. And none of this evidence was actually really even acknowledged or recognized. They still continued with this line of questioning of they believed that I was trafficked. So it was again so frustrating. So I had the initial meeting, and in Scotland you don't have child in need, you go straight to child protection. So I had the child protection meeting with everyone involved, which was social workers, social work manager, a police officer, and housing, I believe. And I asked everybody in the room, is there anyone here who has training in trafficking or modern slavery? And it was complete silence. And so I directed my question to the police officer and I said, do you have training in trafficking or modern slavery? And she said, no. And by this point, I was obviously getting more frustrated because it was seeming that there was no actual process that was being followed. And I explained to them, when there's a suspicion that somebody is being trafficked from a public body, from a council member, medical professional within the NHS, or professional within a school, etc., government facing jobs. If you believe that someone is being trafficked, you can't just leave it up to speculation. You're actually under lawful obligation to report that suspicion to the national referral mechanism. The national referral mechanism then come back and they go through a process of tick boxes, really, as to whether or not that is the case. And they reach what's known as a probable grounds decision. And from that decision and process, they can then intervene if needed. This I advised them of and explained, there is a process to follow. And they said, do you want to refer yourself? And I said, no, because I'm not being trafficked, so why would I refer myself? You are the ones who have the allegation, not me. So you are the ones who need to put forward this case, and they didn't. So it just went on and on, actually, for 12 months of what was really interrogation. So I was still in temporary accommodation, by the way, at this time. Are you following me, by the way?
Yeah, we are with you. We are with you. Those of you on
Okay.
YouTube, please leave your comments, leave your questions, and don't forget to subscribe, to share, to invite your loved ones. We've told you there are many ways you can support Save the Woman there. You can also join as a membership on the channel. You have access to different educational materials, videos, depending on your grade as a member. And there's also super text. If you click text around that button of like, comment, you'll be able to support with any amount to support this work. We need your support. Please share, and don't forget to like, to leave comments, and appreciate our guests. Sharing the story experience is not easy. We don't take this lightly. And also, please be kind with your comments. We appreciate every one of you. Our platform is to create awareness. There are good social workers out there. We are not saying everyone is bad. There are good ones. And when you meet them, there are better ways to communicate well. And you will learn more today. Please take your pen. I can assure you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so where I was at is explaining that throughout this process, it lasted 12 months. and I was in temporary accommodation for the duration of that time. And the reason that I was given why I was not offered longer term housing was because the housing department within Perth and Kinross wanted to await the outcome of social work conclusion. But with the social work cases, usually they're renewed every 3 months, right? So what was happening is that they renewed the case multiple times, and with each renewal, housing decided, oh, we're not going to prioritize this one because we want outcome. So everybody else within that building actually got housed. And if you understand like how social work thresholds work, is where there's a lack of evidence, in relation to the trafficking claims, there was evidence that our housing was unstable and that we were in temporary accommodation. So that was the only tangible thing that met the threshold for their continued intervention. If they had have housed us, there wouldn't have been a continued case. There wouldn't have been enough weight to continue on with it. So this was very much based around them wanting to continue interrogating for 12 months. And when I say interrogation, I actually mean like mythology that was that methods that were used that were basically psychological torture. It was continuous questioning of the same questions over and over again in different ways, despite the fact that they had been given the same answers. And they were asking me questions that were to try and create some kind of regression in me psychologically. So they were constantly trying to pick at past trauma and asking harmful questions without any medical qualifications or being trauma informed to basically get me to agree to sit and explain a whole timeline of my trauma from right from the beginning of childhood to present, despite the fact that they had every piece of documentation. Because for the 2 months prior to them contacting me, they'd looked up every single borough that I'd lived in. They contacted every single borough. They had my medical records. They had any police records from my past. They had everything. So there was actually no logical reason for them to want to pull me in and effectively re-traumatize me when I'd already had therapy. I'd already accessed therapy for that. So it wasn't professional, and I declined and said no because you don't have grounds, for doing that. And the thing with this as well is that it was coupled with this continuous script that was being used of, do you feel scared? Are you scared? We know you're scared. And each time I said, no, I'm not, I don't feel like that. Those are not my feelings. That's not how I feel. Um, so if you can imagine trying to prod at someone's trauma whilst continuously for 12 months telling them that they feel scared, that is trying to regress them, to a point. And then also we were very isolated. There were multiple unannounced visits, I would say 2 to 3 times a week. And if I was to go outside and not notify them, they would then probably, I guess, like apply like coercion and pressure, of why weren't you at home when we visited? But they didn't tell me when they were visiting. And the visits were so frequent that regardless of how much I tried to cooperate, I actually couldn't win. Um, there was occasions where they turned up and were just basically causing a lot of alarm and distress and intimidation, banging on the door. I think on one occasion they may have got the police to assist them, but this wasn't because of me not engaging. This was just them using really heavy-handed tactics. Um, they When they did have their visits, they took the structure of splitting me up and dividing me away from my child. So one social worker would go in the other room with my child and one with myself, whilst the interrogation continued. And not just interrogating me, but also interrogating my child, because they were also asked a lot of leading questions, which I have recorded. And these questions are so unethical, and it's not what you're taught as a social worker. You're not supposed to ask leading questions. You're supposed to remain unbiased and allow the child to speak for themselves. But this was not how the line of questioning went. I was also subjected to alienation by these social workers. There was two of them on my case, and they used to continuously speak down to me in front of my child and speak to me as if everything I said was a lie. And they would say things like, oh, well, we don't believe this or we don't believe that. And if you can imagine what that's going to do to a parental authority or a child's perception of their parent who's continuously being undermined, the only context that I can reference this to is domestic abuse. It's the same if you have a domestic abuser that's constantly undermining one parent. It damages the child because they have to view that, and this is what they're being subjected to. So eventually what I did was I placed a subject access request. And a subject access is basically me or anyone who wants to do it is exercising your right to request any data that's held on you by any organization. And so I placed this subject access with Perth and Kinross Council. It took a very long time to come through. When it did come through, I actually had revelation that the initial housing officer that I disclosed to and did the housing application was making numerous fraudulent calls to Police Scotland and to children's services and other external services with false claims stating that there was current trafficking, domestic violence, and drugs and alcohol on the property. She was actually told by Police Scotland this is not a child protection case because there wasn't risk. This was not a current issue, but she was making it into a current issue, and she continued with these calls relentlessly until the case was opened. And just to clarify as well, that there was no drugs or alcohol on the property, there was no domestic violence, there was security cameras surrounding this block of flats and internal in the block of flats, in the communal areas. Nobody was coming in and out of this property other than my son and I. All of my contacts and support system is actually based in England, not in Scotland. So I had no reason to move to a new area and have anybody in and out of the flat. So all of this was just completely fraudulent. I also found out through this subject access request that our health visitor breached data, and she was disclosing a lot of medical information that was not relevant to the case. And are you okay?
Yeah, yeah. We always, those of you on YouTube, please. Hello. So those of you on YouTube, you must have heard something now. Subject access request. So if you need more information about that, please reach out to us. These are the very key information that you need so that you'll be able to have a full knowledge of what transpired there and here. Not only that, asking help sometimes can open you to the system, and that is why you need to be knowledgeable. You need to be well equipped. She's going to tell you more how she go through this and for her to be able to get justice. Go ahead. So before she comes back, please don't forget, put your question down there. I've seen some comments, good comments. Thank you for sharing your experience. So brave. Thank you for that. And please don't forget, like, share, and invite your loved one. You can't afford to miss this session. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so I was talking about subject access requests and what came up once I obtained mine. Other information that I found out was that Women's Aid, who I had gone to actually for housing assistance and to cement the initial request that my data be restricted, which was not honoured, by the way. And so I went to them actually for the data issue. And what ended up happening was I disclosed historical stuff to them, which happened 13 years ago. And that was then twisted to create further narrative. And so what was said to them was then kind of cherry picked and made into present time. Also, there was information that was mixed with truth and lies. So, for example, this particular housing officer that was the one that instigated the case had come to visit the property on one occasion, and she had mentioned to me that she had previously worked in Bradford, and I said, "Oh, that's interesting because I worked, I did a conference there for part of the work that I was in." And I then found out that on the social work file, it was written that the father of my child was part of a huge trafficking ring in Bradford, which was not a disclosure. I never disclosed this. It was not the truth. There was nothing in this that fitted with any of the data.
If you have any question, please leave your question. Leave your question. We are looking at the questions now. Go ahead.
Yeah, so ultimately there was nothing that had standing in the here and now, and it didn't have weight. And I was very shocked to find that despite going through process actually of challenging this, there wasn't any form of scrutiny all throughout the whole thing. I actually so there's a process that you can follow if you feel like you're not being heard or that your case is not being taken seriously. You follow a process. So you go through the internal complaints procedure with the council, and there's usually 2 stages, I believe, with that. And if you're still not being heard with the internal complaints process, you go to the ombudsman. And from the ombudsman, if you still do not get the scrutiny that is needed, you can then go to court and you can place a claim or a judicial review. And what happened with mine was that I took it all the way to the ombudsman, which took many months, and there was still no scrutiny. And every time it was being ruled that because social work, they go off of vague laws. So they go by the Children's Act and they go by threshold of harm. It's called significant harm. So if they believe that a child is at risk or at future risk of significant harm, that automatically meets the threshold for their involvement. And they can use this to their advantage, I guess, if they want to continue on with a case. However, it does have to be proportionate. The law states that it has to be proportionate, specific, and measurable. And there was nothing specific and nothing measurable in my case because they continued to renew it every 3 months without any evidence to justify why they were doing that. So there was no evidence, of risk. Also, to go back to like your legal rights and these kind of things, there's something called the Regulatory Investigatory Powers Act, which is an act that local authorities across the UK can use if they wish to surveil somebody. The threshold for this level of surveillance is actually quite low. They have to say what their reason is to believe that someone may be a risk to the public. So in my case, potentially, this housing officer triggered an RIPA surveillance through Police Scotland by stating that I was a suspicious person, which was written on her reports, that my disclosures were questionable, and that I was both perceived as a trafficking victim and also somehow involved in a trafficking ring. So that would have met their threshold. But you can approach the Regulatory Investigatory Powers Act tribunal service. So if you believe or have reason to believe, for whatever reason, that you are being unlawfully surveilled, you can report it to their tribunal service, and they do have to investigate it and look into it. So to go back to the timeline of things, after I found out all of this information, and after 12 months of trying to engage them and not getting anywhere, I actually held a meeting. And the meeting was with the social work manager and all the social workers involved, etc. And I explained to them, this case has not moved in 12 months. There hasn't been any progress for my child. You know, by this point, they were offering us a house, but it was full of black mold. It wasn't fit for habitation. I explained to them, you have not helped in all of this time. You haven't had any findings or conclusions. And I also feel that the reasoning for this and the reasoning for this continued involvement is very much to do with racial bias towards my son, because there was nobody on that panel, nobody within the housing that was of black origin. No one. There wasn't a mixed race person. No one. And I just felt like there was no representation, and this was the reason why that there was so much bias. And I said that I want you to transfer the case back to London, where I know there will be equal or more representation, and people will be less likely to be so discriminative. And I explained the rights. I went through laws such as the UN Convention of the Right of the Child, Article 8. Every child has the right to an identity, and the government must respect and protect that right and prevent the child's name, nationality, or family relationships from being changed unlawfully. And there should be no unlawful interference in that process. That's just to give you an example, because my point was that my son actually has a right to access an area more diverse, to have connections with his family, and to have connections with his support system, because his identity was actually massively at risk in Scotland because he was being subjected to so much racism from professionals. They were covertly racist and overtly too. There was constant comments about his hair. This particular housing officer spoke about him as if he was, just a piece of property, like he was a bag. And she said, oh, I love his skin color. Isn't his skin color great? I love his hair. Like talking as if it's an accessory. So I went through these laws and explained, we need to move. I would like you to transfer to another social work department and assist us in this move. And they outright refused to do so. And they said, if you move or make any attempts to move or prior to you moving, we are probably going to go to court. And I said, okay, well, if you're going to do that, then you need to explain to me on what basis. Eventually, they said, well, we might apply for a restrictions of movement order, meaning that they wanted to prevent me from leaving Scotland, me and my child from leaving Scotland. And this was when I realized that there was nothing further that I could actually do, because it was going to go to court if I didn't leave. I consulted with a journalist by this point, and the journalist was actually an amazing journalist from my London. I explained everything that was going on. I gave him the subject access request, so he had all of the information. And I'm so thankful because he actually worked with the editor and he timed it so that I actually fled after this. I had all my belongings in storage. Thankfully, because we were supposed to be moving into this other property, it wasn't looked at as suspicious that I was putting our belongings into storage, and our pets went with boarding, and I was gradually preparing to leave. And I consulted with this journalist and said, please wait until I have left Scotland and then release the article. So I got on the train to London a few days later and I left. And after I left, the territory of Scotland. I felt like my heart was beating. I was so scared and nervous, because I'd been watched for so long, that has an effect on you, And I reached England and I just could breathe a sigh of relief that I was no longer in the country. And I messaged the journalist first and I said, I've made it across, I've made it, you can release the article. And then I contacted Perth and Kinross Children's Services and I explained I no longer live in Perth and Kinross. The case will be transferred. And within 20 minutes of me doing this, my devices were hacked. My tablet started to go in and out of apps and it was glitching all over the place. It was just not usable by that point. My Twitter had been logged in on quite a few occasions by another device in Glasgow. So I don't know. I mean, make of that what you will, but that's what happened. And then when we got to England, it wasn't easy because I didn't actually have any housing waiting for me on the other side. So I was literally depending on the kindness of my women's prayer group and them contacting, various churches that they're with. And we had anonymous donors from their churches that would help us to stay in a hotel for a week. To this day, I don't know their names. And just so much like kindness and support was offered through a community, predominantly through that women's prayer group. Just so many lovely people helped us. We actually stayed with one of the ladies, her church pastor. We stayed in their house and they were so hospitable and people prayed for us. And I've never in my life felt so scared, but at the same time so held and so loved and so protected. Um, in the process of this went on for about 4 to 6 weeks, where I was trying to find a house. So I was in and out of different hotels. It was adding to the false narrative that I was being trafficked. So Scotland, they still held the case because we hadn't got secure housing yet. So what they were doing is they were contacting police, English police, and making up false claims saying that they didn't know where I was, despite the fact that I was telling them each time like where I was to keep them updated. And there was multiple police welfare checks. One of those was actually recorded. It's on YouTube. I'll provide the link later on if you want. And again, it was just intimidation. I did approach another local authority within London to try and get housed. That was blocked because when they spoke to Perth and Kinross said that I should return back to Scotland. And, if I was genuinely being trafficked, this would have been the worst thing for them to do because they would have made the situation so much worse rather than enabling us to access support. And in the end, I contacted someone who I'd known for quite a long time from London through one of the groups that I was in London. And I said, look, I really, really need somewhere. I really, really need a property. Like, time is running out. I don't mind if it's just a room in a flat at this point, but I need to find somewhere and it needs to be private property. And she said, well, I know a flat that's going and you can go and have a look at it this week. So we went to go and have a look at it. And this flat had everything that I had been asking for years that was required. So my son has disabilities, so I needed to have it on ground level. There was certain elements where it needed to have a garden that was secure. In London, that's not easy to come by. And this flat had absolutely everything to a T what we needed. And so we moved in, and it was the biggest victory because then when we did the transfer in meeting, they could not believe it. They couldn't believe that she's found somewhere. How has she managed to do this under those circumstances? How has she managed? And I sent in a complaint to the current local authority that I work with now, actually. And I said, this is what Perth and Kinross have done. Here's the evidence. I feel like it's racial discrimination. They haven't had a proportionate case. The chair had read everything. And when the transfer in meeting happened, he actually agreed with the points that I was making and said, clearly this is not a case where there is current trafficking. I don't have any concerns for that. And our social worker decided that she wanted to do a brand new assessment. She wanted to clear the slate. There was nothing that she wanted to look at with regards to the trafficking because she knew that that wasn't the case. So we went with the local authority that we're now in, and they closed the case relatively quickly, and we were treated fairly and equally. Um, so
Thank you very much. Before you go further there, let's give you a break. Oh, we want to say thank you so much for being brave, for coming around and share your experience. You mentioned a couple of things, right to get information by subject access request. You mentioned about speaking up. You mentioned about asking for help. You mentioned about knowing the law, you know. So on this note, we want to say a big shout out to all those that have subscribed on our YouTube channel. We say thank you very much. And we know you can do better. Those of you on the YouTube now, if you have not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Please press subscribe now. And also, there's a notification bell. If you could press that as well, so that you'll be able to know whenever we put on new video. And this special shout out go to those that have recently joined the YouTube membership channel of Save the Woman. Algoye Elizabeth, we say thank you so much. Please don't forget to press the notification bell. As a member, there's some video that are specifically for members so that you'll be able to be alerted whenever we put this video on. Blessing Emeha, we say thank you so much. Titi Lion, Yemisi, on behalf of Save the Woman, we say thank you. Daisy, latest update, fits me design, we say thank you so much. We are doing a special shout out to latest updates. We thank you for the grade you subscribe to, and we thank every one of you. Please encourage us more. Let the membership reach 100 today. Let us have our first 100 members that will be committed to this work. We thank you for sharing this. We thank you for telling your friends, your loved ones, but we need your money as well. That is only way we can grow this community. That is the only way this work can be sustainable, because there are many backlash. There are a lot of people, they don't want this organization to sustain. We are receiving a lot of backlash every day, especially from our community. We've got a message. There's a foster parent that want to adopt a child recently, but there are some people that think that might not be true, but we are telling you it is true. That is reality. That is reality. There's a new publication recently. It was shared with us from the US contact. We've got organizations that are supporting us also from United States now. We've got community from Canada. We've got community from Sweden, because this is happening everywhere. It's a systemic and institutional issue. And we've got our professional locally, nationally as well, that we are calling on them to say, to stand on the right path, on the truth, honest, because that is what the Nolan principles of public life expected them to behave, to relate with family professionally. There are people that are threatening family. There are people that are victimizing family. There are people that want to silence family. We are saying no. We are not going to accept this. Our interest is to protect and safeguard child and the children in general and the society. We will not allow any form of genocide. We will not allow any form of racial bias, ill treatment. And at the same time, we are using this platform to educate families. There are things we need to learn and unlearn. There are better ways to communicate with our children, because you need to bond with them. There are lots they are facing, bullying in schools. If you don't bond with them, you won't be able to identify those traits when they are displaying this. And before you know, the system already coming with allegations. There's always disclosure. When there's a disclosure, social work will enter your family life. And with that, if you don't know how to deal or how to manage the situation, it could get worse. small issues can become escalated. And you can imagine our guest today is telling you how long does it take her to make that subject request access, and how long does it take the system to provide that information is very, very key. We need to exercise patience, especially if you're on this platform and they have taken your children into care. You will definitely get them back, provided you do the right thing. And what are the right things? You can reach out to us and we will put you through. So, our guest, please, what big changes did you see from moving from Scotland to London? And how did you hear about Save the Woman? Thank you.
So there was a huge difference in how I was treated and how my son was treated when we moved to London, because the representation in London is, that there's representation there, and there's more awareness actually of what trafficking is, and there's less room for professionals to hold bias and continue on this tangent of bias. um because one of the key issues with my case is that the narrative that was spun is that actually my son's father was blamed for a lot of stuff that happened to me prior to me even meeting him. And his name was put against crimes that he did not actually commit and there wasn't a disclosure of. Um, so this is huge, this is so huge that there's a systemic issue of segregating and separating Black families and families of Black origins from one another and from community. And I know that there's nuances with situations, no one's perfect. People do go through problems and struggles, but does that mean that there should be no help and that the automatic response is to segregate and separate? And very much the difference between how we were treated in Scotland to how we were treated in London was like night and day. London were very much trying to create togetherness and understanding and putting us at the center. A lot of the work that I do now is based around trying to push for family group conferences to become a law, where rather than going to child protection, the first initiation would be a family group conference, which means that you're putting the autonomy on the family to make the decisions based on whatever their resiliency is. So you have this conference and this meeting where, yes, there's accountability, but rather than having professionals who don't know the lived experience, who don't know the cultural nuances within that family, putting these demands and expectations, it's the family that are saying, actually, we need help with this factor. We would like to do this, or we would like to do that. So it's putting the power back to a degree with the families. If there's time as well, I just want to quickly go through some warning signs and preventatives that people can take if there's time.
Yeah, those of you on YouTube, please take your pen now. This is the time you need to put things down. Don't miss out. Don't miss out. Go ahead.
Yeah, get your pens ready. Okay, so warning signs prior to case. My case is a prime example of how multi agencies collate data and information on families unbeknownst to the family, and that data can then be used against you. I didn't know there was a case against me for 2 months whilst they investigated. For 2 months, I was just I had no idea. And how this works is you have multi agencies that are now set up. So services like schools, medical, the council, children's services, and adult services, and the police, they all talk to one another, right? So they might flag if they feel like there's a concern. So, for example, if you go to A&E, this is one where a lot of families get caught out. You might go to A&E and it might be a minor issue or a minor situation that you need to address. Your child might have been taken ill, I don't know, with tonsillitis or something like this. And the doctor that they see might have a minor concern, and then it gets flagged up. And the more of these concerns that are flagged, the more is built up against you data wise, which you have no idea of. And then by the time it gets to case, it's harder to defend yourself. So, what I would say from the outset, your biggest defense, even before there's a case, is to place a subject access request. You can do this with any services. You can do this with your council, your doctor's surgery, housing, whether it's relevant. You can do it with the police. Any organization, you can request data. It's called a subject access request. If you look up how to format it, it's simply just a letter that you send requesting your data. Once you have that data, you can then discern, you can go through it, and you can challenge. If you see data that you think is untrue, or if there's bias on your data, you can then go back to them and say, I don't agree with this, what has been said. Can you add context? It's very hard to remove data, but you can ask to add and say, look, there needs to be context in this. And if they refuse to do that, you can take it to what's known as the Information Commissioner's Office. The ICO are the ones that you go to when you feel like your data has been mishandled. And that's a further push to make sure that there isn't a narrative about you in the first instance. So it's very important to do that and have those files as a preventative. And how to talk.
Before you give them another gist, we want to
Mm,
say shout out to our members that have joined Save Duma membership on YouTube. I can see some of them now. Titi Layo, we say thank you very much. It is through your support that this work can continue. And also, we've seen another member, Elizabeth. Go, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. We deeply appreciate it. And please don't forget to press the notification bell so that when we put video mainly for members, you'll be alerted. And not only that, please email us if you need any additional support. And if what we are offering as members is not up to what you expected, please, we need ideas. And you can also join us on our WhatsApp group. Please email us so that we'll be able to put you on our broadcast. We say thank you for being a member. And those of you on this platform, please do the same. Do the same. Doesn't cost you anything. Every little token, every little pounds goes a long way. We deeply appreciate. We need this is the time we need your support. Thank you. Go ahead.
thank you. And yeah, the next thing I wanted to cover as well is like how to speak to professionals, because there's actually a language that is used. There's actually terminologies that is used. The first thing is to keep your language child-centered. So using phrases such as, it's in the best interest of my child that X, Y, and Z happens, right? So rather than saying, I think this or I feel this, you're making it about the child, not yourself. And straight away, they understand this language. You keep things needs based. So you say, my child needs XYZ because, and then you name the evidence, and this is in their best interest. You keep it factual. You don't use emotive language. You stick to laws and you stick to the point. If at any point you need to ask for clarity, ask them. Ask them to slow down and say, I don't understand. I need you to clarify what you have just said. Try to keep everything in writing. So, any communications, try to always, just as a habit, keep that to emails. And if you are perhaps cornered into a phone call or whatever, for whatever
Can
reason,
you please say that again? Please.
yeah, so keep everything in writing if possible. Yeah. So, if you're able to, when you communicate with any professionals in any situation, school or, whatever, make sure that you try and stick to emails if you can. If for any reason that's not possible or you're caught out and you have to do a phone call, which that happens sometimes, you can then follow up the phone call or the conversation with minutes. And you send an email and you say, here's the minutes from what we discussed. And you outline everything that was discussed and you say, are we agreed on this? And this keeps professionals accountable to what it is that they have said or what their expectations are of you. So they can't then say that you didn't keep to whatever it was that was agreed. Um, when social work, children's services get involved, they actually have a set um they look at identifying factors. So they look at the environment, the of the child, the identity and belonging. These are all the needs of the child. They look at parental capacity, education, health, and support. So, the best way to make sure that you are not flagged, or if you are flagged, to fight against it, is to try your best to make sure. I know this isn't, most of the time this can't be helped, but try to make sure that your environment is as secure as you can make it with your housing. Make sure that, it's clean and appropriate and secure. Make sure that your child is registered with a school. If they're not, if they're home educated, you can go to that. For example, there's Education Otherwise that are very good for these kind of things. They help you to submit the reports that are needed to make sure that you're not flagged. Make sure that you have access to support networks and evidence this. Register your child with a dentist and a GP. And if you have access to any form of therapy or recovery or anything like that, make sure that you have evidence of it by supporting letters that would then evidence your parental capacity. You can also do that by character references from people to state, what work you've done, if you've done any kind of service, community work, all these kind of things help. And of course, we've already mentioned the subject access request and the ICO. So we've covered that. The other thing I wanted to cover was to know your legal rights in accordance with laws. So there's actually quite a lot of overlapping laws. I'm not going to obviously go through all of them, but I can name some of them that are applicable. The ones that have the most weight are your fundamental human rights. So you have the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. You have the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And then beneath that, you have the Human Rights Act, which is UK, the Equality Act, the Disability Discrimination Act, the Regulatory Investigatory Powers Act, and social workers use the Children's and Families Act. You can also have overlapping knowledge. Like if you don't know it, just Google it and look up the actual law. And you'll find especially under human rights, you will find that you do have rights. You do have lawful rights that can't be disputed. They're written in law. The other ones is the Mental Health Act, the Housing Act, and anything to do with tort law or claims. So if you have knowledge of these, great. If you don't, just go and look it up. When it comes to police involvement, know that you have rights to refuse entry. If there is not a warrant of arrest or a power, they cannot force entry into your home. So the best thing to do if the police turn up is to say to them, under what power are you here? Am I under arrest? If they say no, you continue talking to them through the door and you ask them what it is that they're there for, and you can engage with them through the door. If they have a warrant, then of course you have to let them into your property and you have to let them do their job. It's usually best to, depending on how much evidence social work have, but if they have a case against you, it's usually best to engage with social workers and allow them to conduct their assessment so that you're seen to actually be working with them. But make sure that you cover yourself. If you need to record, then record it. You're allowed to do that for your own transcripts. You can't use it in court, but you can always record things so you know what has been said, and you can then send up minutes afterwards. I think that's actually about it, other than I just wanted to cover as well that particularly Perth and Kinross, they have, to my knowledge, multiple cases of families that are not of Scottish origin right now that are under court orders and prevented from leaving that region. So I'm not just speaking about my case today, I'm speaking about a lot of bias that is going on in that area. And unfortunately, in Scotland, cases jump straight to child protection. There's no, like England, we have child in need before it goes to child protection. Scotland doesn't have that. and they don't have to categorize why they have the case. In England, you have to state what kind of abuse, whether it be neglect, emotional, sexual, physical, and I think that's it. Whereas in Scotland, they don't even have to categorize it. So it's so much easier for a case to be had. And given that there's just a lack of representation in Scotland, there's so many cases, I suspect, like mine, and I just think that ultimately we need to collectivize on this. There's so much importance of pushing forward the family group conference and collaboration between organizations and NGOs, and just to keep pushing forward, really.
Thank you very much. Those of you on YouTube, please, it is time for you to now vote which local authority you want us to talk about on Saturday. Start voting now. Start naming now which local authority we are monitoring now. Let's know which local authority. And please say thank you, thank you. Help us appreciate our guest for tonight. Help us appreciate her. Help us put it there. Let us feel it. Put thank you. Thank you is the least price you can give, please. Help us appreciate our braveness, our understanding for coming over. Understanding for coming over. We always tell people it is on consent when people want to share their lived experience. So if you need our support, don't be afraid that we are going to put your story out there. No, we don't do that. It is what we are agreed on, we put out there. And not only that, most people come on this platform after God has saw them through and they have conquered, not when the case is still ongoing, not when the case is still live. Most of the testimony you are hearing, families have been settled. God has done it. And you need to be prayerful. You need to be prayerful. You can see our guest started with that word of God, encouragement. So we are monitoring now. Please subscribe, leave comment. Derby, yes, definitely. We are coming to Derby, definitely. Oh, thank you for coming. Somebody say thank you for the insightful information. Yes, please always take note of this. And if you missed any part of the session, feel free to come back to watch again. And if you have benefit from this, don't limit to yourself. Help us share this widely. Help us share this widely. And if you can help us take our subscriber to 5,000 tonight, we don't mind. A number of membership that joined, we are targeting 100 this week. Please, if you know anybody that can support us, encourage them to join our membership on YouTube. And also, there's this button there where you can put thanks, super thanks. When you click super thanks, it will also ask you whether you want to make a donation. Please, that one comes straight to support us directly. So once again, we say thank you. We normally spend 1 hour, 5 to 6 p.m. But because of the tips you need to get tonight, that is why we extended that. Like she has mentioned, a community is very, very important. It takes a village to raise a child. When you are involved, when the social work gets involved with your life, it's good to engage. However, you need to be mindful of your use of language. It's very, very important. So for tonight, we are going to say thank you. As we are rounding up, I will call on any of the team members to say thank you to all our followers, our supporters, those that have subscribed, those that have joined our membership, those that have even pressed thanks, super thanks with special donation, and those that will be considering to join us soon on our membership and shared widely. Grace, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, just to round up.
So we'd like to thank everyone for joining into today's meeting. We are so grateful for your time. Don't forget to subscribe, as Mr. Olanikan said. subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then support our work that we are doing. We'd like to see you all next week as well. Also, we want to say a very big thank you to the very person who joined us from Scotland for being brave to share her story with all of us. We are so grateful to you. Don't forget to reach out to us if you have anything, any issue that you would like us to support. Just get our email address and then send the email, or you can get the Mr. Lalikan's WhatsApp number, send him a WhatsApp, and then we'll get it from there. Thank you all very much for joining in. See you next week.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We say thank you once again. We see you next week. We just put in our email address for those of you that you might need our email address, and it is through word of mouth. If you see any radio station, television, any blogger that you want them to share our work, please share with them, tag them, and let's do this together. And also put it on all your social media. We say thank you once again. We see you next week, Saturday. We are monitoring the comments so that we'll be able to know which local